Well, if you know anything about science, you know the KISS rule. Keep it simple. I'll let you fill in the blank. So, scientists like the KISS rule. Everything has to be simple. Aristotle and Ptolemy's method with 80 plus circles, not exactly simple. Right? And that's what the little cartoon is. It's just saying, oh, it's all these complicated things. Nope, they're just rectangles. Just keep it simple. So, also in 300 BC, there was this other guy, Aristarchus. I'm guessing you probably never heard of him. He thought the sun was the center of the universe and not Earth. Back in 300 BC, right? Which was also the exact same time that Aristotle was saying everything's Earth-centered, everything's circles. Well, how come you don't hear about him? I mean, nowadays you hear about both sides of the argument. How come you didn't hear about that back then? Well, Aristotle was smart, and he built schools at his way of thinking. The other guy, published a paper, and that was about it. And so Aristotle's out there going, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is why, and basically just telling people his way. And of course they would go and tell other people that way, and that's just the way it was taught. Kind of reminds me of the Blu-ray versus the HD DVD. Probably many of you don't even know what the HD DVD was. It came out at the exact same time as the Blu-ray. We've probably all got Blu-rays at home. Because that's the one that lasted. That's the one that gained the popularity. So Aristotle's idea gained popularity just like the Blu-ray gained popularity. Although I know Blu-ray is now going out the window, but work with me on this, okay? Alright, so Copernicus actually came across this guy's idea. He's like, wait a second, what do you mean the sun is the center of the universe? I thought we were the center of the universe. And so he starts thinking about this. And he plops out the Earth and puts the sun right in the middle and starts looking at how everything is moving. And he realized it does explain things. So his idea is called the heliocentric sun in the center of the universe. So actually, even though Galileo and Copernicus get a lot of recognition for this, it really was the other guy that had the idea. So this heliocentric universe, all planets orbit the sun, Earth spins on its axis. It explains why the sun and the moon rise and set, why the stars look like they go around in a circle at night, the seasonal changes, the solstice, the equinoxes, why we have different constellations, and it explains not only the retrograde motion, but the difference in brightness of the planets, right? Because as one planet overtakes us, looks like it could be going backwards, and it gets brighter. So this was a major shift, right? The Earth is no longer the center. The sun is the center. Huge shift in thinking. Okay, so he figured out not only the Earth, but Mars and all the other planets are going to orbit the sun. Right? And so he used Earth and Mars, and this diagram kind of uses Earth and Mars to show you the retrograde motion, the changes in brightness, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And Copernicus wanted a simpler model. That's why he started looking into it. He was like, those 80 plus circles, that's ridiculous. There has to be another way. However, if you look at the model off to the side here, you can see one big thing. Well, two things. He's still using circles. He's still using deferents and epicycles. It still looks kind of complicated. And not only is it complicated, but I mean, we're not the center of the universe anymore. That's a hard pill to swallow. So it didn't gain much acceptance. So then there was Galileo. He's known as the father of experimental science. He didn't invent the telescope. He got his hands on a blueprint of a telescope and created his own from that blueprint, but he didn't actually invent it. And what he said kind of followed Copernicus with, oh, well, the sun is the center of the universe, and it was not accepted at that point. If you're wondering where the Big Bang Theory comes into play, Leonard is the experimental scientist in the Big Bang Theory. Galileo actually first used the telescope to look at ships coming in. And then once he figured out that worked, he ended up pointing it at the moon and the stars in the sky and all planets and all that fun stuff. And he actually found out that the moon had mountains and valleys and craters. That was incredible. He also looked at the sun, and he saw these things called sunspots, which you can see them clearly right there. That's actually a really good picture of an active sunspot. Anyway, he could see these things, and he noticed that they moved, they rotated. And so if they rotated, that must mean the sun actually rotates. Now, just thinking back then, they didn't have the fancy telescopes we have now that have all the nice filters that we can get pictures of the sun like this. He actually stared at the sun. Let me just say this now. Not a good idea. Do not stare at the sun. It will hurt your eyes very badly. He also noticed that Jupiter has moons. And this is a copy of his diagrams of Jupiter, that big open circle, and his moons, the little stars. He saw the 4 biggest moons of Jupiter. They're called the Galilean moons because he's the one that found them. He also looked at Venus and saw Venus had phases just like the moon. The phases of the Venus. If you watched that song, you'll know what I'm talking about. But interestingly enough, it did have phases, which mean it must have a changing angle so that we can see different parts of it being reflected. But of course, like I mentioned before, it was not exactly accepted. The church actually banned his work and Copernicus's work because, well, they agreed, right? And the church did not agree with them. So he was told not to do any further work on astronomy. He was forced to retract his claims and say that yes, the Earth is the center of the universe, and he remained in his house for the rest of his life. Okay, so now you're in your house, nothing really to do, and you're told don't look out the window. Right, well, what's the first thing you're probably going to do? Look out the window. Right? You hear all those things nowadays. Oh, don't watch this movie, or boycott this, or boycott that, or don't do this, or don't see that. What's the first thing you do? You go to that movie or you read that book. Right? Why is it so interesting that people banned it? So, of course, he's going to keep doing his work. Human nature.